Hello friends, and it's Funky Play Brothers, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube. And today I'm reading the finale of Five Nights at Freddy's Tales from the Pizzaplex, number 8, B7-2, by Scott Cawthon, Adrian Wagger, and Kelly Parra. Last time we left off, Billy just saw his B7, and his grandma was encouraging B7 to become a part of her. That's it, Billy's grandma was saying. I know you've been alone in the dark. You've been so lonely since Billy rejected you. That's why you called, right? I'm sorry I couldn't let you be with Billy again, but we've been bonding, haven't we? You don't have to be alone anymore. The conglomeration of parts surged upward. It latched onto a polyester-enhanced leg, and part of its metal sunk into Billy's grandma's skin. Expecting his grandma's scream, Billy winced and started to rush forward, but his grandma didn't scream. She just kept talking. There was a strain in her voice, a breathiness that made it clear she was in pain, but her words were clear. Good, she said. I'm so happy you're here. His mouth opened in shock. Billy watched as the thing completely took over Grandma's leg. No, not took over, replaced. His grandma's leg fell away from her body as the thing attached itself to her hip and kept stretching out farther, reaching outward and upward to supplant even more of his grandma. As it moved, the crippling and shuffling metal and plastic continued to make his signature clinking and sliding sound. Those were the stimulus that finally got Billy in motion. Angry with himself for not going to his grandma's aid sooner, Billy started rushing towards her bed. That's when his grandma noticed him. And turning her head toward Billy, his grandma, seemingly unconcerned that her other leg was dropping away from her body, called out, "Stop." Billy wanted to convince himself that she was talking to her attacker, but he'd seen enough to understand that she didn't see the thing as an attacker. Billy knew she was talking to him. Stay away, Billy, his grandma said. I want this. I'm ready to embrace this new life. And Billy was unwilling to accept that what he was hearing, totally repulsed by what he was seeing and compelled to stop it, no matter what his grandma said. Billy took another step. No, Billy, his grandma choked out, her voice tight. Let it happen. She looked away from Billy, back down the length of her ruined body. Billy let out a mewl of despair. How could he just stand here and watch his grandma possessed and mutilated by his metal plastic creature, a creature that Billy, in essence, had created with his obsession and stupidity? Billy loathed what he'd been and what his existence had left behind. He couldn't bear to see the truce of B7 take the grandma he'd only just come to love. As if in response to Billy's revolution and mechanical monster, now overtaking Billy's grandma's torso and working its way up the arm, turned a head-like metal proportion woven from plastic projections, a tangle of wires and sharp metal plates. Two of the plates parted, creating a mouth-like gap in the continual crunching parts. I want to be with you, B7, the thing said to Billy. That's where I'm supposed to be, but you wouldn't invite me back in. I thought I sought out your grandma so I could be close to you through her. Billy didn't care what the withering amalgamation of metal and plastic had to say. What he cared about was that the thing had almost completely laid claim to his grandma. Its sharp edges were impaling his grandma's flesh, puncturing the skin between her limbs and burrowing deep into her torso. The thing was slicing her open her sides, reaching past her bones, laying claim to most of her vital organs. The metal and plastic invader was now almost 90% consolidated with his grandma's body. 3 of her limbs had been severed. They lay on her bed, oozing blood, but not as much blood as Billy might have expected. It was like the mechanical interloper had cauterized Billy's grandma's flesh as it had upspurred it. Rendered weak by the shock of what he was seeing, and helpless by what his grandma had asked of him, Billy stood there. He wanted to look away from his grandma, but he couldn't. His gaze was riveted on her. That's why Billy noticed when the massive parts started to twitch. The vibration was stubble at first, but it quickly became more violent. In a matter of seconds, the wreckage of B7 was quaking so hard the bed's box springs squealed in protest. What's happening? Billy wondered. It almost looked like the thing was trembling in fear. Billy's grandma let out a sound like a whoop of triumph. With her one remaining hand, she gripped onto a few metal plastic parts that hadn't yet bonded themselves to her. The parts jolted as if trying to resist, but Billy's grandma held on. She even smiled. Raising her head to look down the length of her now maimed body, Billy's grandma said, "You understand now, yes? Well, I'm afraid it's too late to change your mind. You're stuck with me." Billy's grandma turned to look at Billy again. She kept hold of the parts that kept trying to flail away from her as she said, "I've been terminal for some time now, dear. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to worry you." She looked back down at the creature that was fighting to free itself from her. She bared her teeth in a strained grin. Our friend here thought he would be very worried. Thought our friend here, though, should be very worried. Billy felt a sob well up. His eyes filled with tears. His grandma returned her gaze to Billy. "Don't waste your tears on me. I've had a good life. I'm ready for this." She grimaced as she wrestled with the still thrashing metal and plastic. "This morning I woke up and knew today was my last day. I wanted to do this one last thing." The ex-B7 creature's metal parts lashed in a clear frenzy to escape. "B7, help me," it called out. The pitful of pale, revolted Billy. He hugged himself with one arm as the thing clicking sounds came out faster and faster, becoming a rapid-fire din that filled the bedroom. The collection of metal discards fought furiously to free itself from Billy's grandma, but its efforts weren't enough. Billy's grandma's intention was too strong. She forced the last of the parts to meld with her arm, and she exhaled in relief as that arm spilled away from her body. Still holding Billy's gaze, his grandma said, "Don't grieve for me. It's time for you to have a good life. Be true to yourself and be kind to other people." Her face now deathly pale, Billy's grandma swallowed and licked her lips. Then she winked at Billy. "And go to Sunday school," she gave Billy a small smile. Billy felt tears slide down his cheek as his grandma let out one last long exhale. She went still. Remaining rooted, Billy continued to stare at the macabre composite of his grandma and the still conclusive B7 parts. The metal and plastic were moving weakly now, and with every second that Billy watched them, they slowed. Finally, the mechanical monster stopped moving completely. The clicking ceased. Billy looked for his grandma's staring eyes to the rigid motionless of the metal and plastic parts. He could see that it was over. Both his grandma and what was left of B7 were dead. When it was all over, Billy wanted to just leave his grandma's house and forget he'd seen what he'd seen. He couldn't, however, leave her like that. So he sat with her for the rest of the night, and in the morning, he used the rotary phone to call Frank. Frank helped Billy bury his grandma and the dregs of B7. He then drove Billy to the hospital so Billy could start the process of getting his new prosthetics. I'll be sure her house is taken care of for as long as you need, Frank told Billy as Billy got out of the old SUV. Thank you, Billy, as he bounced on the crutch that he expected he wouldn't need for much longer. Billy stepped back. Frank leaned out and gave Billy a long look. Go forth and have adventures, young man, Frank said. You have to experience life, to write something interesting. Billy nodded and lifted his hand to wave as Frank drove away. Then Billy made his way into the hospital. 2 weeks later, Billy walked out of the hospital without his crutch. He now spotted 2 new prosthetic limbs, and his new arm and leg were the latest in flesh-colored, real-looking prosthetics. Billy had gotten used to them quickly. Strutting away from the hospital and wearing jeans and a new bright red shirt that went great with his striped beanie, into which Billy had tucked a small carnation, a tribute to his grandma, Billy thought about the first adventure he intended to have. He'd been living with Clark and Peter while he went through the process of being fitted for his prosthetics. It had been great to hang with them and get to know a few other guys, but he intended to stay with them for just one more night. It was time for him to get on with his life. Not at all sure whether he was making the right choice, but feeling like it was something he had to do, Billy bought a plane ticket to Lima, Peru. He intended to find his dad. Both terrified and hopeful, Billy was ready to throw himself into the unknown. He wasn't sure how the trip would unfold. Maybe it would be good, maybe not. But either way, he'd figured he'd end up with a life experience worth writing about. And that was the end of the book. So it was a pretty interesting story. There wasn't much of B7 in it. There also wasn't why B7 is sentient or animatronic thing, since it was just a bunch of mechanical parts inside Billy. So there's no explanation of why he's a sentient robot or why he can't escape the body he crawled into. It's a very confusing story. I think they should have added a little bit more to it so it's less confusing. But altogether, it was a good story. And maybe they'll continue it with what happens to Billy's dad. Maybe Billy's dad works for Fazbear. That would be interesting to see. So, friends, thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Follow us on Twitter at the Funky Play Bros. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Funky Play Brothers. Support our vlog at cashapp at the $sign Funky Play Brothers so we can have more unboxings, more taste tests, more adventures, more monies, and for support. Thank you for watching. Bye.